Everybody, it's Jeremy. Welcome back to Lucid's Tournament Game 7. This is going to be the pretender design for Helheim, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to... caveat, right? Caveat that I put on all my Dominions videos. I'm not an expert at Dominions. I'm just an avid fan. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to gloss over things that shouldn't be glossed over. I'm going to focus on things that shouldn't be focused on, etc., etc. That being said, right, my plan is to kind of review the options for Helheim, period, kind of talk about them just in general, what I think is interesting, what I think is cool. And then I've got a couple of pretenders that I've designed that are things that I considered when starting up the game. And then, of course, we'll go over the one that I actually chose. Go from there, okay? So before we do anything else, let's actually take a look at what Helheim has to offer for pretender design. Now, some nations come with bonuses for particular blesses. Helheim does not. They do, however, prefer cold scale 1. So that is something to keep in mind in designing a bless. All right. So, what does Helheim have access to? Well, much like their nation themselves, it's less quantity and more quality in theory, right? They have some really good gods, really good pretenders. Some standouts being things like Irminsul, who is very good, the Fountain of Blood, which can be very good for certain situations, the Earth Serpent, which even after the nerf is still pretty damn good, the Lenormand, which is pretty damn good, the Frostfather, which is one of the best rainbow chassis in the game. Again, I think it got nerfed a couple months ago, if I'm remembering correctly, but still really, really good. And then a couple of other interesting gods. Notably, they do have the kind of Norse pantheon gods, although there aren't very many of them. Again, you're going to see, compared to some other nations, there aren't as many options as you would expect. So, we've got, in Dominion 4, the standouts for me being the Monolith, the Fountain of Blood, and the Irminsul. Monolith has a nice spread of Earth, Astral, and Nature. Earth, Astral, Nature allows you to do some basic things, some really good buffing, like you can do stuff like magic weapons. You can do stuff here. We'll actually just do a little design here. So you can do stuff like fire and shock resistance, bark skin, and magic weapons. And this gives you a decent amount of protection, right? A decent amount of fire, elemental protection, fire and shock being the most important ones. Bark skin, which helps boost up your natural protection on some of your troops, and magic weapons. Monolith is a very good base god. So that's just something that I've seen done to great effect quite frequently, and it's very cheap, right? This is -3 design points, right? And it's awake currently, so we could play with this. We could put it dormant. We could leave it awake. We can drop down some luck and maybe some sloth, or sloth, because we don't really need productivity very much, that type of thing. But this is just some kind of base stuff. So Irminsul, Monolith, and Fountain of Blood are all kind of cool. You get the Norse gods, right? You get the Father of Winters, you get Allfather, etc. Some of these can be used to do some pretty interesting stuff, but they're all kind of niche, right? They're all, I really want thunder weapons, or I really want to do this particular thing. So we're not really going to go over them. Special shout out to the Demi-Lich for being the Demi-Lich, because he do be that way sometimes. The Lenormand and Earth Serpent, right, are both very good awake expanders. Just taking the Earth Serpent basically on its own, you can do something like a regeneration bless on it, and then you can do very cheap stuff. That's some pretty interesting things. And then you have all the rainbow chassis, none of which are incredibly interesting standouts unless you're going for something very specific, aside from the Frostfather. The Bitch Queen, unfortunately, I really want to like the Bitch Queen, but she's just... I have not found her to be incredibly useful. No. They do have the Svartalf Mastersmith, which is one of the kind of like specials that only a few nations get access to, and it does have Mastersmith. This can be very, very useful if you have a particular concept in mind. The only problem is he's 260 points. That's incredibly expensive for a Dominion 1, for basically a rainbow set. So I don't really find that being very, very useful more often than not. In developing or picking a god and developing a bless for any nation, right, you have to understand what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, and what you have access to in the nation. So with Helheim, we have quality troops that are very costly, right? So, and that cost very high, this is very important, very high recruitment points. So we do not want to tank our order. More often than not, we're going to want to boost our order if at all possible. Because if we don't, then it's going to be difficult to get enough recruitment points to actually use our good troops. Those good troops are sacred, so we're going to have high Dominion strength. We can go into Sloth because those troops don't need very many resources. Although if we do go Sloth 3, that is going to be somewhat annoying to deal with on certain situations. We prefer Cold 1. That does mean that we can't go Cold 3 and get full points. We have to go Heat 2 to get full points, which can be somewhat painful in the wrong circumstances. Obviously, we're probably going to want to go Growth 3. I hate Misfortune. I've found out that I hate Misfortune. But Misfortune 2 is something that's probably going to be necessary to get enough points. And then I'm going to throw this out there as a lesson learned, right? You do not want to go Drain, more often than not. You do not want to go Drain on something like Helheim, because their high-quality troops are incredibly expensive, meaning you're going to have less of their commanders, and they're already not very... If we take a look at their troops, right? The van here is 120 gold for one air magic, and 7 research. If you take Drain 3, that's 120 gold for 4 research. That's incredibly bad. And it doesn't get better, right? That's 160 for 7 on a Hellcarl. It's 260 for 11, just somewhat better, right? But if you take Drain 3, that 11 is going to be 8. That's really, really, really bad. And these are very expensive. These are the units that you're going to have to rely on for research. So taking Drain on Helheim is... I'm sure it can be done in the right player's hands, but it's very hard to deal with. Okay, so that's kind of like a general concept that we have to keep those types of things in mind, right? And then it's a matter of determining what do we need from Magic. So from Magic, we have very good Death, we have very good Air, we have very good Earth. We have very good Death, very, very good Death. We have relatively good Air, okay Earth, Blood. Our best blood is actually out of heroes, national heroes. So unless we take Fortune, we're going to run into issues. And then we occasionally have Fire, but it's very rare. So our path access is not very high. We have no Astral. We have no Water, basically. Our Fire, we have 1 Fire. And we have no Nature. So we have issues when it comes to that type of stuff. So if we want path diversity, we're going to have to do something about that. So let's take a look at some of our gods. The most common gods that I see with something like Helheim are more rainbow chassis. Because we have really good starting troops, there's almost zero reason to go and Awake Pretender with Helheim. Because you have such good troops, you don't have issues with expansion which is what an Awake Pretender normally is there for, is to make sure that one, you either, it's a specific choice against a rush option that you're trying to avoid, or it's to help you expand, right? Helheim does not need help expanding. Even if we weren't going like Sacred Spam and we were just going with Hellherdings, we still expand very, very well. So keep that in mind. We're going to go with Test 1, 2, Harsh, and then Cold as Ice is the actual one that we end up going. So take a look at Helheim Test 1. So what is this? This is a very general rainbow chassis, where we're basically getting pretty good scales, and we're going Magic 3. This gets us fire and shock resistance. This gets us a lot of defense. So this is going to boost our defense to where we are significantly harder to hit, both with our Hellherdings and with our Vanjarls, our thugs. We've got Strength of the Earth and Strength of the Flesh, so that's +4 strength, so that we hit significantly harder. We'll be hitting closer to 20-ish damage rather than 14 to 16. Magic weapons, because it's very useful for us. I actually opt in this type of scenario to take Withering Weapons rather than taking... we're elves, so we don't need Spirit Sight. Undying is very useful, but I find that if you're going so much defense, Undying just doesn't proc very much unless you're fighting against players. And we don't need Undead Command because we already have a lot of Undead Command. We have very good Death Mages, so we have plenty of Undead access. Whereas if you put 4 points in Death and you grab Withering Weapons, then Withering Weapons can actually be very, very useful in trades against the enemy. So if you get into an early war and you're consistently raiding against someone and you send out like a Vanjarl with, or a Vanhurst or a Vanjarl with 5 Hellherdings, right? They run into a group of enemies and they lose, they die. Okay. However, that they are, with Withering Weapons, they are much more likely to take out a couple of extra units in that fight, because remember, Hellherding gets 2 attacks, and this is going to count for both of their attacks. If they hit you and you fail your magic save or your magic resistance roll, you're probably going to die unless you're one of the races that has longevity, right? So I think Withering Weapons is one of those blesses that we can sneak in on something like this. That's actually really nice, okay? We take major poison resistance because we need poison resistance, otherwise we'll die to things like foul vapors. We take 1 point in resilience because we had that left over. You could take minor poison resistance, so you have 15 protection. I just find that that's unnecessary more often than not. But if you prefer the 15 poison resistance, go the 15 poison resistance. That's fine, right? This gets us a Pretender that can get into almost anything and is very, very useful when they come unimprisoned, right? It also gets us a good mix of defensive and offensive options on both our sacreds, our sacred units, and our sacred thugs. Okay. It gets us Order 3, which is really useful so that we have enough recruitment points. Sloth 3, because we don't care about it that much. Heat 2 is painful. This actually costs us a lot of money, and it makes us vulnerable to things like Fire from the Skies, or Flame from the Skies. Growth 3 is Fortune 2, which is useful, or it's... we can handle it, right? And then Magic 3 is there to help combat the overall lack of really good researchers, basically. And this is, I think, a general, safe, good build that you don't have to worry about too terribly much. And it's kind of like, you know, tweak it as you see fit. But generally speaking, I think this build works as a very safe option. Okay? We've got Helheim Test 2. Alright, so this is a very different type of scenario. This is a Fountain of Blood. It is dormant, so you have to wait until year 1, basically, which is fine because your Hellherdings are good enough troops on their base, or you can just go Herdmen if you don't want to use Hellherdings. I would still go Hellherdings, but you can do kind of whatever you want and expand still relatively easily. But this gets you Growth 3, Misfortune 3, and Magic 3. This is kind of more of a scales build. But it also gets you Unholy Weapons. I don't like this build very much, but this is something that I've seen talked about or discussed here or there. More often than not, what this is more for is early wars, right? This gets you good research, good growth into the mid game and late game. And what it'll let you do is let you go through, expand around what you're doing, expand around your capital without any real issues. And then when you get into your first war, you have this Incarnate Bless, because most of the time when you start to lose against someone, it is because of their sacreds. So Unholy Weapons actually comes in and will, with the Hellherdings having 2 attacks each, you get 2 of them in a square, you get 4 attacks, you suddenly have 40 additional armor-piercing damage against Sacreds and Pretenders, and suddenly your Sacreds start chewing up other Sacreds. I don't know how well this would work in the long run, but this is something that I saw suggested a couple times, so I included it. Then we have this is kind of more of a, this is more of a very aggressive, you want to run at people early on kind of bless. Again, we have taken a Frostfather. Again, this one is dormant rather than imprisoned, so this is for a first year or year 1 war. Okay? You'll see a bunch of the things that we had in the previous ones. You'll see Strength of Earth, Strength of Flesh. That's a common thing because you want to have that higher damage on your Hellherdings. Okay? This one, though, makes less use of resistances for more raw power. Now, resistances are really good. Resistances keep your Sacreds alive, especially in the mid and late game. But in the early game, sometimes they can kind of be ignored, and you can benefit from just going front-loading raw power, basically. So this gets swiftness and defense instead. So you have more defense on your Hellherdings, and they're also faster. This means you can kind of lightning bolt attack rear commands, where if you split your Hellherdings and you have a couple on the north side, a couple on the south side, you have attack rear commands, and they get blessed, and then they go poof, and they kill whoever's in the back very, very quickly. Once again, we take Withering Weapons and Magic Weapons because those are very important. We take a point of Strong Vitae just because we could. And then we take Barkskin, because Barkskin is going to be one of those early game, if you can just get it on people. So for your first war, suddenly your Hellherdings are much more difficult to kill, because Barkskin is going to push their protection up to, I think it's about 15 or 16, which isn't like fantastic or anything like that, but it's pretty good compared to what they had. You can take a look at, yeah, so they have 11. So if you put their base at 10, it should push them up to, I think, about 14 or 15 maybe. So it's pretty decent. This is not a Hellbless, though. I wanna stress this out. Like, I don't like Hellblesses. I do not enjoy a game that is designed around the concept of, if I don't kill someone in the first 12 turns, the game's over for me. I don't like that style of play. However, I am going to throw this out there. Helheim is pretty decent at that style of play. So if that is your thing, what you could do instead, right, is legitimately just tank everything. If we come into People are going to yell at me for this. But if we come in here for something like a... that. So what we want is we want to make sure we have a lot of damage, ways to deal with magic, right? Defense is very strong. And since we've got so much of a spread, we basically just want to take everything. So... quickness could be a fucking thing, I suppose. Not if we want to take, much magic, huh? What would we have to do for quickness? We would have to scrap so much. That's not worth it. It's better to take Drain 3 and just get a bunch of other points. So in something like this, I've seen where's... So we take something like Berserker. I don't think Blood Bond is actually really good. Because the issue is with Blood Bond, if you Blood Bond your Hellherdings, that pops their glamour, and you don't want that. But you do want Strength of Flesh, you do want something like Strength of the Earth. I would actually kill Berserker. I still think one of the best things that you can do for them is Barkskin. Do something like attack skill, swiftness, defense. We still want magic weapons. Do we even need to take... so if what we do here is we can cancel the death magic, because death magic really doesn't do much. Or we could go for fear. Fear's expensive though, isn't it? Fear's like, yeah, Fear's like 10 points. Why is Fear so expensive? That seems bonkers to me, by the way. Seems cray-cray. Nope, nope. Nope, nope. I think we just get rid of death. Just take 4 and everything else. To the point where we can actually take... just run at someone in the early game, right? That's the goal. This seems horrible. And this is why I don't like the concept of, we don't need that. There we go. That saves us a bunch of points. We don't have to do a bunch of death. Bunch of death. Shall we? Take a shock resist. Mountain survival. Basically just like wasting points. So this is something that you could do right at the gate to just run at someone. So +4, +5, +4, and then Barkskin. So that gets your Hellherdings to a 16 strength. So they're going to hit for 19 with their Light Lance. That gets their defense up to 23, which is pretty damn good. That gets their attack skill up to 17, which is also pretty good. Gets their protection up to like 14, or I think it's 15 is where their protection would. That would be pretty scary to have to deal with in the early game, but then you would basically be dead. I don't like builds like this. You know what? I probably don't like quote-unquote Hellblessed style builds, because I'm probably not good at making Hellblessed style builds. Someone else could probably be like, here, you do quickness, thunder weapons, and that's a Hellbless, you know? And that probably would be true. But I wonder what that would take. What would that take? Let's actually look for something like that. Frostfather is actually probably what I would take for that. So we wanted to do something like quickness, thunder weapons. What would that take? Would that even be worthwhile? Why would we go thunder weapons necessarily? Armor negating damage, fatigue damage. Maybe that's good. Because quickness is going to give us 4 attacks. What if we did something else, though? What if we did something like flaming weapons? That's 6 armor piercing damage. That'd be pretty interesting. Especially since, like, shock is the most common, like, resistance type that you're gonna get. I think, yeah. I think that's, like, a very good point. Wouldn't shock more often than not just be ignored? Because you get some, like... I almost feel like if you're gonna go for something, just go unholy weapons. Is there a water blood that we can pick out? There's the Fountain of Blood. I don't think there's, like, very many blood options, unfortunately. Yeah, it's probably going to be the Fountain of Blood. So we do something like quickness, unholy weapons, awake. Have to do that. Could do that. Could do this. Take 1 point. Do something like that. So you have this quickness bless, and quickness on its own is probably going to just kill everything. 5 hell herdings, 6 hell herdings that run at you and have +2 attack, +2 defense, and they attack 8 times in a square. That probably just kills most basic stuff. And then unholy weapons, it would slaughter anything sacred, basically. This actually, I don't know, this might be all right, but we've done enough just messing around. Let's talk about what I actually ended up taking. So I ended up taking cold as ice. So this is kind of a variant off of the first one that we looked at. It is a very defensive bless, fire resistance, shock resistance, cold resistance, winter's gift, so snow movement, basically. We've got 2 invigoration, magic weapons, 1 resilience, major and minor poisons resistance, and we've got blood surge. So this bless, let's talk about the other stuff. 6 dominion, 3 order, 2 sloth, 3 cold, 3 growth, 3 fortune, and 2 drain. This build is not a... This is very specific. This build is not a Hell Herding build. This bless is not a good bless for Hell Herdings. It doesn't have any base strength, right? Base strength is important for making Hell Herdings hit hard enough. It doesn't have base defense to make sure that the Hell Herdings are harder to deal with or anything like that. It does have magic weapons, which is very useful for Hell Herdings. But what this bless is this is a Vanjarl bless. That's its intention, is a Vanjarl bless. It gives a bunch of really good resistances. It gets a bunch of reinvigoration. It gives Blood Surge, which gives a Vanjarl, right? Because Blood Surge is bad if you have a bunch of Sacreds, because that means every single one of them needs to get a kill to activate Blood Surge. But if you've only got 1 Thug, and that Thug is Sacred, yeah, he's going to kill something, because that's what he's doing there, right? So he's going to get the Blood Surge. So Blood Surge with 2 reinvigoration, that gives you 3 reinvigoration. And what that kind of like helps with the Vanjarls is Vanjarls can't use boots, so that's basically a boots of the messenger for them right there. It also gives them more attack, more strength, more defense, and it gives them very good resistances. So this is a bless that is okay. It's not good, but it's okay for Hellherdings, but it's meant to be for Vanjarls and Hangadrots, basically. It also gets us decent scales. I say decent for one very big reason. These are good scales for most things. This is drained through 2, and it is terrible, terrible, terrible. As I have learned, it is terrible for Helheim. It's very bad for Helheim, because Helheim does not have efficient researchers. And this is, if this is the one thing that I could change, this is the thing that I would change. I would go back to something a little more Hellherding based and less Vanjarl based, and I would take either neutral magic, or I would actually take magic 3. This spread allows our Frostfather to break into almost anything that he needs to break into, whether he needs to climb up blood. He's already good for things like Ice Devils. He's good for things like Archdevils. He can climb higher into blood very easily through boosters. He's close enough in nature to make almost any of the nature boosts, or he can make any of the nature's boosters and climb high enough in nature to cast almost anything nature-wise. He's high enough in astral to be able to cast forge boosters and climb high enough into astral. Notably, you'll see we do not have death here, because I just found it very unimportant, because we have such good death. I felt like we didn't need it overall. So that was something. And yeah, I like this bless. Honestly, I really enjoy this bless. But the game that I ended up playing, when I started the game, I planned, because again, you need to have a scope and a concept of what you want to do. I planned to be less reliant on my Hellherdings and more reliant on mass-producing Vanjarls everywhere, and relying on those Vanjarls for better research, but also for thugging. My concept was I didn't want 5 Hellherdings in every enemy province. I wanted a Vanjarl in every enemy province. I wanted a Vanjarl with like a weapon and a shield and something like that in every fucking province. And we get kind of close to that. This bless worked for what it was designed to do, but I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing that messed me up is the drain. It really, really hurt my research in the long run. But you will get to see that in the actual game itself. I think that's going to be it for the Pretender design. This is Cold as Ice. This is our god. This is what we went with. Let me caveat that. Why did I go Fortune 3? It's because if you think back to the Nation Overview video, because we're playing with worthy heroes, there are some really cool, interesting, unique heroes. And when I started this game, I was just coming off of like the mid game of a Misfortune game, and I've basically learned that I hate Misfortune. I do not enjoy Misfortune games. I enjoy Fortune games way more. And that's I understand that that's not always optimal. I understand that that's not always gonna be the efficient route. But that's just how my head works, right? Is I just enjoy Fortune way more than Misfortune. So it's probably gonna always lean towards Fortune in the future. But we'll see how it goes. Now, that's going to be the end of the video. This is the god that we went with. Should prove interesting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.